Hello everyone, I am Debora Malito, Assistant Professor in International Relations, Xi'an Jiaotong-Liverpool University, China, and today we'll present paper submission number 4158, Developing Data for Policy, Mapping the Political Economy of Measuring Governance. I will present this paper on behalf of my co-authors, Gaby Umbach, European University Institute, and Antonio Savoia, University of Manchester. The growing demand for comparable data for policy and global governance has stimulated an important debate on the supply of performance-based assessment. So the study of indicators and their use has gained traction. In this context, both the quality and power of governance measures have been widely investigated, but the political economy of measuring governance remains somehow under investigated. We still don't have a systemic overview of the distinctive nature, purposes, scale, and geographies of actors, networks, institutions that are involved in the funding and producing of governance measures. So, our research question is about who rates governance, where, how, and what for. And why is this question important? Despite the growing attention to question of legitimacy and validity of measuring governance, we have a limited knowledge about the structures, hierarchies, and power relationships involved in the world of measuring governance. Therefore, the impact of political economy factors in the supply and quality of governance metrics requires more systematic attention, as do the implication of subscribing to certain Eurocentric avatars when measuring and monitoring governance. Let me now briefly mention what we know about knowledge production and governance indicators. We seem to be living in a reflexive indicator culture where quantification indicators and rankings are just and approached as a way of doing politics. The use of performance indicators has already been studied as a means of soft power, productive power, power of ranking world politics has been studied as well. At the same time, also the capacity of indicators to stimulate political pressure on state behavior has been investigated. What we miss still is an understanding of the impact of certain political economy factors on the measuring of governance itself. And for this reason, our dataset contributes to the debate on the data for policy. In particular, we map governance measures from a political economy point of view to shed light on the main actors, resources, relationships that participate in the measurement of governance. The dataset presents new data, and we fundamentally divide the data available on three dimensions: the quality of measures, the political economy of production, the geographical and geopolitical dimensions of the provider. For the purposes of our data collection, we define the political economy of measuring governance as the study of political economic variables that shape the production and funding of governance metrics. This data set is composed of 81 measures that capture a wide range of dimensions that are related to the concept of governance. So we base the data collection on measures of state capacity, democratic governance, corruption and integrity, press freedom and accountability, rule of law, protection of property rights, and the functioning of political institutions. The dataset includes information on measures of governance, drawing on several data sources that extend from 1979 until 2020. And the variables were collected from the methodological documentation available and the website of the original measures, but they have also been cross-checked with the World Governance Indicators, Court of Government Dataset, Harvard Dataverse, UNDP Governance Assessment Portal. And in this slide, you can see some of the measures, some of the 81 measures listed in our dataset. From a conceptual point of view, we approach measures of governance as intersubjective concepts and paradigms that are complex, unstable, not clearly delimited. And for this reason, we need a better understanding of the political context, ecosystem within which they are made, within which they make sense. So our dataset maps the geographical and governance level distribution of state capacity and governance measures. And we do so to better understand the funding and production of these measures. Knowing who funds, who generates, who rates, and where these actors are located sheds some lights also on the quality of these measures and their policy implication. This knowledge is also very important because enable us to investigate the setting of international standards and the monitoring of governance goals. This is a way for us to understand how measures become part of a standardized activity of producing internationally comparable data for policy. In our explorative analysis, we find that combining three basic dimensions of measuring governance, that are qualitative metrics, political economy, and geography of production, we can advance a scalar understanding of the distribution and contribution of governance measures, where by scalar we mean both geographical and governance level. Such a perspective provide us the opportunity to better understand whether the patterns of political economy and geography of measuring governance establish some kind of power relations in governance at a transnational level. So our dataset contributes to the analysis of what Hans and Porter define as the much overlooked performative role of numbers in governance processes. From a preliminary descriptive analysis of this dataset, we can understand a couple of stylized facts of comparative and cross-national governance measures that are produced by a range of different actors. So the first finding I want to highlight is about reducing complexity. So what we name here as simplicity. Most measures, as you can see in this graph, most measures in the dataset result from the aggregation of a limited number of indicators between 0 and 99, while some are composed by a higher number of indicators, 100 to 399. And we name this reduction of complexity as simplicity. If we consider the number of sub-indexes, as the second graph shows, and thematic area as shown in the first one, in which the measures are organized, our analysis shows that most measures are composed by a small number of sub-indices and thematic areas. So also this funding contributes to our understanding and framing of these measures and their simplicity. And so their capacity to reduce complexity. The most common dimensions of governance analyzed are corruption, economic process, government, law, accountability, civil liberties. And based on this reduction of complexity, also from a mathematical point of view, governance measures enhance comparative judgment, and the dataset evidence shows that most contemporary measures of governance are actually used to rank state performances. Our analysis also shows that a slight preference emerged for the output perspective of governance, and half of the measures we have in this dataset use a mixed methodology combining both subjective survey and objective kind of statistical data for their assessment. More than a half of the governance measures in the dataset are result of academic or expert assessment. And in terms of reach, as you can see in this graph, most measures have a global scope, even though they do not have a global coverage. So these measures provide cross-country data related to all the continents, but less measures have a regional coverage, opting for a specific regional scope, and some have a proper global coverage, or at least they attempt to approximate the global value of governance by covering a number of countries equal or bigger than the official number of nation states recognized by the United Nations. But in many cases, the limitation in country coverage relates to data accessibility as well as a diachronic and comparative consistency. Overall, our explorative analysis finds a global north, global south divide in the production and use of governance metrics, as you can see in this graph. The dataset analysis shows that measures of governance reflect the political, institutional, legal, cultural context from which they stand and which they are applied. And their conceptual nature varies according to their purpose, usage, and developers. In our future research, we would like to analyze how the use of certain governance measures may influence state policies, in particular, how the nature of producers, funders, and their geographical location may influence, for instance, the measuring and monitoring of SDG 16. So far, what we can observe is a main challenge, that is the fitness for multipurpose applicability that these indicators have. So this multi-level use of governance creates a major difficulty, because governance measures are required to perform in different contexts for a diverse actors group, even if the instruments themselves remain targeted on evaluating political structures and processes, no matter if they are used for ranking, ratings, reform, advocacy, or research. So this required fitness for multi-purpose applicability creates challenges not only for designing governance measures, but also for the reform of governance systems that they evaluate. So assuming that governance measures could be defined in a homogeneous way would face another problem, that is of creating sort of clinical measures that are detached from real-world context. And for today, I stop here, just pointing out that our future analysis will elaborate further on these explorative findings.